Hi, everyone who's logging in. We're going to give it a couple minutes to let people sign into the event. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you.
While people are logging in, feel free to let us know in the chat where you're coming from, how you heard about our conference, and what aspects of sustainable development you are interested in. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to give it a couple more minutes to let more people log in. To all the new participants who are logging in, feel free to let us know in the chat where you're coming from, how you learned about our conference, and what aspects of sustainable development you're interested in. We would love to hear from you all. We're still giving it a couple more minutes to allow people to log in, but we'll be starting shortly with our event.
Resultados y de los países, y después continuamos con resiliencia y los casos de los países. ¿no? Representación, quiénes son.
Oh, we have some people in the chat.
¿Qué
Hi,
es
Paola.
ya te digo, el servicio?
Welcome. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 10:05. So bienvenidos, welcome everyone to day number 3 of the 6th installment of the Conference for Sustainable Development in Latin America and the Caribbean at the Yale School of the Environment. We hope that you have been enjoying all the speakers and panels in the conference so far, and you'll continue to tune into our events that are happening throughout the rest of the week. Today's keynote speaker event will focus on the water, sanitation, and hygiene sectors in Latin America and the Caribbean, and its response to COVID-19 pandemic. We are very excited to have for you today 2 incredible speakers who are experts in the fields of water, sanitation, and hygiene, and have worked extensively within the context of Latin America and the Caribbean and a post-pandemic recovery. Our first speaker is Virginia Marriezcurrena. Virginia works with the Stockholm International Water Institute, coordinating its partnership with UNICEF Latin America and Caribbean Regional Office for the Accountability for Sustainability Program. Her areas of expertise are water governance, multi-stakeholder processes and platforms, participatory diagnostic methodologies, sectoral capacity building needs assessments and processes, etc. Virginia has more than 25 years of fieldwork experience in Africa and Latin America. She has served in a wide variety of positions, from engaging in environmental grassroots activism and policy influencing, managing large-scale WASH governance programs implemented in complex and conflict-prone areas in rural Mozambique. She holds an interest in innovation and change management and has coordinated cross-cultural, international, and interdisciplinary teams for decades. Virginia holds a Master in Laws from Rosario University in Argentina and a Master's in Environmental Management and Policy from the Lund University in Sweden. Virginia is an Argentinian national and speaks English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. She has co-authored publications on accountability for fragile states, COVID-19 response in WASH, and sustainability standards. So Virginia, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And our second speaker is Sonny Guidotti. Sonny works for UNICEF Latin America and Caribbean Office as a regional WASH specialist and is the co-lead of the regional SDLAC sector group. She is a public health professional and environmental engineer with more than 13 years of experience in emergency response, development, private sector, and research. Sonny has worked at global, regional, country, and field levels in various regions and countries, including the United States, Panama, Myanmar, Angola, Kenya, Liberia, Haiti, Honduras, South Africa, Bolivia, Guatemala, South Sudan, and Uganda. Sonny is a native of Brazil and speaks fluently Portuguese, English, Spanish, French, and Haitian Creole. She has worked in different types of emergencies, including cyclones, hurricanes, cholera, conflict, earthquakes, flood, and drought responses. And she has demonstrated experience in leadership and sector coordination, program and team management, knowledge management, and evidence generation, disability, inclusive, and gender responsive WASH and market-based programming, and working across the humanitarian development continuum. So Sonny, welcome, and thank you so much for being here as well. So now we'll hear Virginia and Sonny's presentation on the WASH sector and its response to COVID-19 in Latin America and the Caribbean. And then at the end, we will have a short Q&A session with questions from the audience. So to our audience, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and then we'll try to get through as many as we can at the end. So with that, Virginia, I'll hand the floor off to you.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you to all the organizers for inviting us to share with you this experience, and we are very, very happy to do so. Yeah, what are we going to share with you today? A bit of we all, of course, are aware of the COVID-19 pandemic in LAC and what it means for the WASH sector and why WASH is important in the middle of a health issue and a health pandemic. What is the relevance of WASH? WASH, of course, being water, sanitation, and hygiene services. So what did we do as SIWI during the COVID pandemic and in terms of analyzing the wash sector? We did a mapping of emergency policy measures, and we designed phases towards this resilience building. We are going to share with you all this. And then in the second part is to share with you how a knowledge product, how a knowledge development, a little bit of a research can be applied in practice in real time, trying to help some countries adopt or at least analyze some of the measures taken by others, and learning by doing and adjusting the response plans to really get more services to those who were in need. So we would like to share with you some country experiences, or in fact, how we share the knowledge product through the SDLAC, which is a network you are going to listen from SUNY, from UNICEF, and then the integration of the country response plans and some examples of Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil. That's the content for today. Well, you know that the pandemic hit hard in Latin America with more than 20 million cases and 500,000 deaths. You know probably that Latin America accounts for 8.4% of world population, but represents for 25% of the confirmed deaths in COVID. So it hit really hard in the continent, much harder than others. And we can analyze why we should analyze that at a later stage. What is very specific about Latin America, as you of course know, is about inequalities and how that can explain the high death rates because of the access to health systems, etc. But I would like to share with you this picture, which is a really graph image on what it means in practice. The inequalities in Latin America. This is a picture that was shared by somebody, the service provider, a water service provider in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, from one of their regions where they serve. And she was explaining in that webinar, okay, you see across the wall, in this side, you have these wealthy families, in the other side, you have the favelas. But what the pandemic brought to everyone was the realization or the consciousness that we all are humans and the virus doesn't make this distinction. And so we have to address inequalities with a different light, no matter, of course, without entering into ethical and justice means. It's also a human nature, and for some people, they needed to see this, the issue on this light to realize how the inequalities in Latin America or in specific countries can really play a big, central role in response plans in a pandemic. So what happens? Well, first of all, what is SIWI? SIWI is, as Carlos said, is a Stockholm International Water Institute. It's a knowledge institution. It's a applied research institution. And we have a contract to provide, well, we provide services for knowledge services for many organizations worldwide. But we do have a very specific and strategic contract with UNICEF worldwide. And we have another contract for UNICEF LACRO, the Latin American Caribbean Regional Office. And then we provide technical assistance for 19 countries in the region. Within that framework, UNICEF LACRO requested us a bit of an analysis of what the pandemics would mean to the WASH services and what were the ideal responses or the ideal policy measures that the country can take to respond or to pay attention at least on WASH services within the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic in real time. So in the beginning, UNICEF Latin America, the regional office has made a note on what it means, the pandemic for the social protection sector. And they wanted us, like the WASH team, to complement that note with the WASH perspective. We started researching what was going on in different countries in terms of the response of the pandemic with the light on the wash services, I mean, water, sanitation, and hygiene. So the countries were responding from the health sector clearly, from the emergency sector clearly, but we had to deep dive there and see what was going on in the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector. That was the mandate. We did, I will explain you what we did after in a minute now, but I would like to invite Suni to explain in what context they asked us that and what is the tool they have to share the knowledge once this knowledge was gathered. So let's come, I can give you the word to Suni to explain a bit of what the SDLAC is and how they work with UNICEF at Latin American level to share the knowledge that we were supposed to produce with the note. Are you there, Suni?
Yeah.
Great.
Can I go ahead? Yeah, thank you, Virginia. Yeah, so as Virginia was saying, I mean, it was key to work with SIWI for these analysis, and we needed a platform to disseminate the knowledge and to share the information. And I think we turned right away to the regional SDLAC sector group, which UNICEF and PAHO co-leads, and which includes a number of organizations and partners working in the sector in LAC, ranging from government to academia to NGOs and so on. And so, you know, as Virginia was saying, the start of COVID, I think it was a very sort of fast moving environment where we were trying, you know, to learn as we moved, and what we wanted to offer was real-time knowledge and information to help guide other countries as to what, you know, neighboring countries may be doing or how they were responding. I think for specifically on the SDLAC group, you know, just to sort of give you an understanding of what we do, we represent the sector at regional level and work on advocacy and strategic partnerships, but we also support the national wash sector platforms. So, you know, besides sharing these with the sort of regional group, we were also able to work with and disseminate the information through the national wash sector coordinators and the work we do directly with them. And we also do capacity development, and most importantly, the regional analysis and evidence generation, which is really what we're touching on with the public policy mapping. So yeah, I think we brought the results of the partnership and the work that SIWI did on mapping public policies in real time in countries, and use the platform to disseminate that. And it was really important for us to make sure that it was done in a couple of languages that are used in the region, and it was iterated, right? Because it was a fast-moving environment. So I think there were a few versions of the public policy analysis, and I don't know. In terms of Virginia, I let you go more deep dive into it now.
Great, thank you, Suni. Yes, what we did with this request from UNICEF, we started designing a matrix. What was the matrix about? We wanted to identify a category of measures I'm going to show you now, and define the geographical scope of the map. So we say, okay, we are going to map what is going on in the wash sector in then it was 26 countries in Latin America in different stages. As Suni was saying, we were iterating and redefining and enlarging the scope. In the end, it was 26 countries. And by the way, it was 84 countries worldwide, because then this methodology was expanded to other UNICEF collaborations worldwide with us. So, but for Latin America, it was 26 countries. I'm going to show you now, when I say identify the category of measures, there were some ideal measures from the perspective of the consumer, ideal measures from the perspective of the service providers. I'm going to come back to that now. Then when we have this matrix where all the information would fit, we gathered the information online. There were 5 of us, like typing and researching, especially mentioning Isabel Alvarez, who may be participating, and she was leading the data gathering. And so how we did that in real time, it was browsing through government websites, national or subnational, through service providers, websites, association partners, donors, multilaterals, well, all the information that was available online. And then we did validate some parts of the data or to cover areas that were not really published in terms of information. We validated through interviews with specific actors. So with all that, this is the matrix we designed to gather the information within. So as I said, we have from the user perspective, they had 5 pillars that for us were important to monitor on what kind of measures the government were taking on each of those. But there are 3 from the user perspective and 2 from the utility perspective. Utilities are the service providers, those providing water to households or to public spaces, or drinking water to the users. So from the user's perspective, we mapped as a first pillar all the measures to intensify behavioral change initiatives and hand hygiene. You may remember that once COVID hit in March last year, everything was about wash your hands. So, there was a lot of work done here. Then strengthen IPC measures in households and public spaces, this infection and prevention and control measures. Then preserve the capacities of 4 people, including the most vulnerable, to satisfy their work needs. So these are the 3 pillars we mapped in measures from the user's perspective. Then from the utilities perspective, we wanted to see what the governments were doing towards ensuring the continuity, affordability, and safety needs of the services. I'm coming back to this later. And provide technical and financial support to utilities. You may remember that many countries waived the payment of the bills for water services, but then who would pay? And the service providers were more stressed than anyone, because they had to assure a provision for everyone and with no payment. So it was very complicated for them. So they needed some extra technical and financial support. You will see in the end of the research if it was provided or not. So that's the matrix for you to have an idea. We identify the measures and the countries on the top, and then you see the cross means that this measure was in that country taken. If it's blue, it's because it's a national policy measure. If it's orange, it's a subnational or an NGO measure. So we have the database on everything what happened from March till July, August. And as Suni was saying, in 3 languages, you can have them online. We have a basic note, which is describing the methodology that I just shared with you. And we have the annexes that were updated every 2nd week or every month when things started not to change as fast as before. So all this information is there. But for me, what is important are the main conclusions. Well, there are several things important, but I'm going to now share with you the conclusions. And from the consumer point of view, there were lots of measures about transferring direct cash transfers for consumers, but those the direct cash transfers were not targeting water. So water was not an issue. It was more about the economic emergency. Waiving consumer payments, obligation for service providers to reconnect users with unpaid bills. You may remember that was a very popular measure at the time, that people would not pay their bills, and those who were not connected because of that, the service providers were obliged to do so in order to assure continuity of the services, of course, in such an emergency. Intensification of one-watches campaigns, as I said before, was very popular. Measures in sanitation, not many information, not substantial information in terms of what measures were taken to assure sanitation for everyone, and very little or no gender sensitive measures. So the countries were responding a bit like the traditional way. There was no specific focus on how the pandemic would impact the women versus men. I mean, differentiation between different needs or interests or power. But that's, well, you know, for the general, there were some specific measures, but for general conclusions. In terms of the service providers, some measures, there were some measures to support service providers, the liquidity, solvency. I'll come back in a minute with the example of Colombia on this. Some measures to protect workers, very few support for rural service providers, and not clearly indicated how continuity of services would be funded. And at a later stage, let's say April, May, we started seeing some donors jumping in to support service providers. Now I would like to give again the word to Suni, so that she can share with us, once we've done this mapping and we have these conclusions, how this information was disseminated throughout Latin America and what happened to it. Thank you, Suni.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. So as I said, we use the SDLAC group as a platform to disseminate, you know, with SIWI, the results and the information were presented on a sort of a conference or a Zoom call. We were organizing those on a bi-weekly basis. And working with the national sector platforms through the operational support work we do with them, we noticed that there was a need for support around COVID-19 national WASH sector response plans. And so based on the analysis and work that SIWI did, we came up with a response plan that was adopted by at least, these are the ones that we didn't really like ask every 47 country and territories in LAC, but you know that we know of, 9 countries used this response plan that came from the public policy analysis, you know, with the 2 users and service providers aspects to it, and then 3 countries also used the plan, but adapted to their context and the way that they were looking at the crisis. So yeah, these are, you can see in color the ones that use the dark blue countries that utilize this. So you know, it's just an example of how the public policy analysis was not only guiding governments in terms of what actions they could be taking, but also help them on planning, and which is, you know, a key building block for systems work and for the response, really.
Thank you, Suni. Yes. So the point, okay, here was to share how a knowledge product could enter into practice very soon when you have the right setting to do so. So great, the results of what was going on and in the emergency phase was there, but we know that there's more than that, and time has passed. So how do we build resilience, which is the topic of this conference, by the way, so it's important to focus on here. How do we build resilience from what has happened? From emergency towards resilience. So in any emergency situation or crisis like the one we lived and we continue to do, you have the emergency phase, and then you have a different, like a spiral of events that goes and ideally would lead you towards a sustainable WASH services. In this specific case, it's WASH services. So you go through a step, you have the emergency, you have the response, you have a relief phase, then a recovery phase, and then ideally a development phase towards the sustainable WASH services. So this is, of course, an iterative and come and go process. It's not as linear, it's never linear as we try to design it here, but it's just for you to know that we are working on new phases of this crisis. And that's what I'm going to share with you now. we divided the COVID crisis or the COVID pandemic into 4 phases, which are, of course, not specific for COVID or not specific for SIWI, but the general humanitarian framework talks about this with different names and starting and finalizing points, but there is a consensus that are phases towards recovery. So we have divided now here into 4 phases. Confinement, which was very specific for COVID, de-escalation, those 2 are part of the emergency response, and then the recovery phase and working towards resilience. So we've mapped, like we did for the emergency phase, we are mapping different activities that go within each of these 4 phases towards resilience. There are other aspects of crisis management or recovering and working towards resilience that are underlying. You will see them in the gray area down because they go through the phases and they're equally important no matter where we are in an emergency phase or in a resilience building phase, which are, for example, coordination, information management, advocacy, and capacity development. You need all of them always. So this is just to share with you that this is the framework we are working now. It's not only emergency, but we are working in a broader framework, trying to map and trying to analyze what the countries are doing in the other areas, in the other phases. This is specifically for overarching aspects. As I said, for example, policy, there are specific measures of policy that are taken during lockdown, during the escalation, during recovery, and during building resilience. And same for regulations, financing, planning and preparedness, coordination of the sector, monitoring and evaluation, and capacity development. So we are analyzing a bit of the puzzle, what the countries are doing towards building resilience. Now I would like to share with you some byproducts, let's say. I mean, so far we've seen the matrix, the mapping, the results, the use that UNICEF did to disseminating it, and the use that some countries did in planning the response. And the current thought of this team working on this, on how we're going to build resilience after the emergency phase. I'm going to go now to 3 specific examples of the application of this mapping, apart from the ones that Sunit has told us, which are Colombia, Ecuador, and Brazil, how they used the mapping for the actual response. This is an example of Ecuador. In Ecuador, in November 19, there was the wash bath exercise. The wash bath exercise is a diagnostic on the wash bottleneck analysis tool that we do with UNICEF and SIWI together with multi-stakeholder actors in Ecuador to analyze the status of the sector and to develop an action plan to overcome the bottlenecks of the sectors towards achieving the SDG 6. I mean, to the human right for water and sanitation for all. So it was previous to the COVID crisis. We did that in November 19. We went there and we planned 2-3 years without thinking that the COVID crisis would hit. In February, you see down here, the first case was declared or confirmed in Ecuador. And then we started. In March, the emergency was declared. And where in March 18, we started the watch cluster, so the emergency body for water emergencies was activated. We in March started mapping the measures, March 2020. In April, Ecuador started a multi-stakeholder table for the response, and we provided some technical support for them, also to help them understand better what was going on in the field, because that's key for the emergency. What was really going on at sub-national level? What was going on at local level? How would we assure the information from what was going on there would reach national level decision makers. So in order to facilitate that, Ecuador made a multi-stakeholder emergency table, let's say. We were trying with some methodologies to assure the flow of information so that the government would decide exactly what kind of region in the country needed most resources, specific input, specific supplies for hygiene or hand washing devices, etc., etc. What were the real needs in the field and how the national level can support. After that, we continued this support for the emergency table for some time, and in the end, just to make it, to cut the long story short, Ecuador, UNICEF, and with the support of SIWI, elaborated the post-disaster needs assessment, and the government was, in principle, using and satisfied with the support that both agencies gave. These are products that you can find also online that we developed to support the response in Ecuador. Yeah, different from the wash bad sector report to the field note on the PT-8, the plan for needs assessment. So this is a bit of the story in Ecuador. In Colombia, we supported multi-stakeholder dialogue analyzing the COVID-19 response, which is called From Response to Resilience Building. We are finalizing the document as we speak. I see this graph is not very illustrative. We can do it much better, but it's a complex moment. It's a complex issue we are working on how to portray. But the point here is that what we facilitated together with UNICEF Colombia was a multi-stakeholder dialogue that included representatives from four constituencies: the government, civil society, development agencies, and private sector. And we mapped, for example, in the government, you see the Ministry of Housing, Cities and Territories was there, Ministry of Health and Social Protection, Ministry of Education, municipalities, and then they were in the civil society, community, NGOs, action against hunger. Well, the private sector, there were some service providers and development agencies from this dialogue participated, UNICEF, OCHA, World Bank, SDC, PAHO, etc. So what we did was facilitate remote dialogue throughout 2 months, well, more than that. Some sessions, 2-hour sessions through every second week, where all these actors would join the sessions and try to analyze what has happened during the response. What was good, what could be improved, what was the role, how some areas worked, like how they coordinated with each other, where the resources adjusted to the emergency, was a clear leadership or not, were the responses reaching local realities, could we have done better this area or that area, or this kind of reflection was the invitation for all these actors together. So we worked in 3 different groups. One is the coordination between Ministry of Health and Water and Education. Another was the Ministry of Water itself, how they would evaluate their own response at national level. And the third group was the international cooperation and how they would evaluate the way they responded to COVID. With a bit of perspective, this was October and November, so they could have some time to breathe. The crisis, the worst part of the crisis has passed, so they could reflect on their own role in the response and what they could have done differently. So we think these kind of dynamics are very key for building resilience, because they gives you the time to reflect, the analysis, and to learn what has happened. And what were the conclusions in Colombia? Just to give you a few or a hint of what were the conclusions from themselves. There was clear leadership of the Ministry of Housing, the WASH responsible ministry, with a very comprehensive and innovative plan in the case of Colombia. There were quick measures, or measures taken quickly to support users and formal service providers, and less support community service providers in rural areas or in peri-urban areas. There was good coordination across ministries with international cooperation, but in adjustments, of course. More investment in preparedness is needed because there were not enough planning for preparedness or contingency plans, etc. Identify better channels, give funds for emergencies. A strong focus needed to improve in articulation national and subnational. That didn't really work well. And adaptive regulation for community-based service provider is needed, because in Colombia, the regulation is only for formal service providers. So the subsidies that the government was very innovatively and quickly putting at the service of service providers didn't always reach the ones that are community-based, because they needed to be registered and have some bank account and certain criteria for selection that are not tailor-made for community or for organized NGO association kind of service providers. So more information is needed in information, more attention, sorry, in information management. I'm gonna run through quickly. Brazil, we did also a policy note analyzing the response at federal level and some state level, and we did a webinar also. This is just for you to share with you a bit of practical uses, sorry, of the mapping of the policy note. The remaining questions for building resilience, yeah, from the overall process, what we have learned. And these are, of course, questions for all of us to answer. How to assure financial sustainability at service providers in the middle of to the long run? Because as I said, there was the duty to continue to provide services, but this is, in the end, somebody has to pay for that. And it's not always the case that the user is not paying, who's going to pay. How to sustainably work on operational maintenance for watching schools and healthcare facilities. You know that what happened in schools, and now that we are going to resume face-to-face classes, all the schools are not really prepared to host them because they don't have infrastructure for wash. And how are we going to assure a hygiene without water? So this is a huge pending issue for building resilience. How to assure accountability for affected populations, how to be sure that those who are affected are integrated into decision-making, their voices are heard. How to create an enabling environment for resilience. And when I speak about enabling environment, I'm touching upon the issues that I mentioned before, like policy, preparedness, coordination, capacity building, monitoring and evaluation, funding. So the core issues, how do we really tailor-make them towards a resilient sector? What is needed for a localized or subnational effective response? How to assure that connection? How to work more on decentralized WASH solutions? Decentralized, not subnational here, but free from the networks, like not connected to the main networks. Standalone solutions for WASH. How do we learn from this experience and build from there? These spaces for reflections, are there? Probably it's too early now, but just to have that in mind, that it's important that we step back a bit and think and reflect what has happened, how to continue in a different manner. What kind of capacities does the sector need towards resilience? What is the gender impact on the pandemic and its effect on WASH? How are we going to look at gender issues now? How does this experience shape the sector, national, international funding? So how does the experience of the passing through a pandemic has shaped the funding of the sector, WASH sector and health sector in general? how to integrate risk-informing programming in all programs so that we assure that when any program we do in future is informed by the risk of having a pandemic or climate change or the risk that is present in this specific environment. And how does finally the climate change conversation integrate into the post-pandemic context? This is very personal, but I am very curious to see how the climate change, conversation, how the climate change knowledge is being shaped by having passed a global crisis like the one we have just passed, or we are in middle of passing. So having said so, thank you. That's all for me, and I'm really happy to listen to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia, and thank you, Sunny, for an amazing presentation. I think it was very interesting to see how you go from emergency response all the way to building resilient systems for WASH in Latin America. So now we'll open it up to questions from the audience. We have a question here, and Virginia, you were just talking about climate change, so this is a good segue. The question is, what lessons can be learned from the response of the WASH sector to COVID-19, and how can these be applied to the response to other stressors such as climate change?
Well, it is exactly our point. I mean, we would like to connect the climate change response with, the COVID response, which was a very practical, very clear one, to the climate change debate. If this happened with the pandemic, what would have happened if it were a climate change crisis? And what would happen if really tomorrow we start feeling the flooding, or well, we are already feeling we are already suffering the consequences of climate change, but not in the shock manner that we did with COVID. So just a short answer for that question, which is like the core of what's coming in terms of resilience, is that climate change, the response have to be very adapted to the context. So the first thing that I would do is to be aware of what are the risks of a certain context in terms of climate change. And having mapped those risks, or having been aware of what are the risks in this specific context, and being aware of who the actors are also, because it's not the same in a rural context with that in an urban context, who makes the decisions for what, etc. So having those basic structure for response clear, then we have to start dialoguing and adjusting the response. First, ideally would be to have this first dialogue, like analyzing how we responded to COVID, and then build from that towards how we would respond in a climate change scenario. We are doing this kind of work for WASH in Bolivia, for example, in Iraq, where we collect, we sit down with technical experts on climate change, and we see what are the real risks in these specific areas, and they start talking, so that if something happens, they are already interacting and they can respond easily.
Awesome, thank you for that. There's some other questions here coming in. The next question from Michelle says, how did you overcome challenges such as lack of data, especially in countries where governments were hesitant to accept the COVID-19 pandemic as a major problem? And also, as a follow-up, how do you include data and voices from people who cannot participate in virtual meetings, do not have internet, etc.?
Yeah, great. Yeah, great questions. The first one, data on countries that were not accepting COVID. That was very tricky. We had the experience of Brazil, for example, where the federal government has an approach, and some provincial or state governments have a different approach. So we got very difficult. I mean, the federal government didn't take any measure for a long time, while the state government did. So what we could do is only map the measures, the political measures that were taken towards improving service delivery in the COVID area. So we just mapped the measures that were taken, and we highlighted that for example, Venezuela was another country which was very difficult to find information. We highlighted that there's no information on this in this specific country or in this specific context. So there's nothing else we can do because of the emergency kind of service. If it's another kind of research with more time, with possibility to do field work, then you can do that. But in this specific case, it was just web search.
With the other Claudia.
With the second question on, sorry, can you remind me of the second question? Voices of people who doesn't have internet. Yes, I remind. That's very key. Absolutely. What we did in the experiences we had especially in Colombia and Ecuador, we assured that these people were invited to places where they would join with other people who had internet. So that's how we heard them. I'm not sure if they were in the same room or how it worked, but they were connected when we needed it. That's something that UNICEF office in Colombia, for example, did a great job getting the right stakeholders in the table at the right time and assuring they got internet. It's the most important challenge we face in our work in terms of paying attention to that, not leaving anyone behind because of the connectivity. But on the other hand, I have to say that we were happily surprised by remote working, because when you are in a room in face-to-face working, the power dynamics in the room are so visual, and sometimes you have to be very attentive. You always have to be very in attention so that you see those who are not speaking much, and you have to call them for a few questions so that you can hear your voices here. And those who are the powerful, sometimes, you know, they tend to monopolize the word. While in remote working, it's easier. Power dynamics are somehow different, and power distance is shorter because you have everyone in the same Zoom meeting. So this is very personal and from experience. I can't speak on behalf of SIWI, or I can't speak on behalf of any research that we've done. It's that's experience from the dynamics we did lead, that you have everyone on the same page. And of course, you have to always have in mind who are the most powerful, who are the powerless. And so you have to give the words to those that are not naturally monopolizing the debate. But to some extent, they are in a similar playing field, which is not necessarily the case when you do face-to-face work. So it's still work in progress. It's extremely valid point. And yes, we are paying attention to assure that those who are powerless or traditionally marginalized don't continue to be in this specific case.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to the next question from Sarah Jones. Sarah asks, what were the main impacts of COVID on the financial stability of service providers, and were the national measures helpful for service providers?
This is a key issue. Again, World Bank is doing a study on this. There are many small, short-term studies done in real time, as we did ours, especially by the World Bank, the ones that I know, or the associations of service providers, international associations. They were devastated, honestly, because you have to know that the watch service providers in general work at deficit in a general scenario, because water is a public good, it's human rights, so the government has to subsidize, and people many times don't pay. So there is financial situation on a normal basis, normal scenario is always critical. And suddenly they had to provide more water to a larger extent of population, and suddenly they didn't receive their payment. So in Brazil, for example, I remember that the invoices decreased 70% in April. So they had to do their more work with 30% of their cash flow. Yeah. So the thing is, then the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank campaign with subsidies in Colombia, they got this very, very good exercise of creating a line of credit specific for service providers. So there were some measures here and there, but the impact in the middle to long term is still undefined. And this is also another study that we are doing at SIWI, and the World Bank is finalizing a more thorough study on this. But yes, it's a very important point.
Great. Moving on to our next question. It says, we saw that at least 9 countries incorporated the National Wash Sector Plan in Latin America. What opportunities do you see for future collaboration between Latin American countries to ensure that wash needs are being met?
Do you want to take this, Annie?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, the COVID response helped us to put some systems in place and identify some key resources and tools that were useful for different national wash sector platforms in different countries in LAC. No? And I think in LAC, you have a very heterogeneous situation with, you know, countries ranging from Argentina to Haiti, very sort of, you know, so the inequality is not even only within countries, it's really across the region in a way. And so we, you know, part of the work that we do at the Regional Wash Sector Group is to provide capacity development support. So we are mapping the capacity gaps of the sectors, understanding in the different countries what are areas that they lack on, and then how we can provide that you know, fill that gap in terms of capacity development. And we get that information also from the wash bats. So, you know, we will be complementing and making that capacity development plan based on that, and grouping countries based on their needs and the situation. So I think one area is on the capacity development agenda. I think the other area that we're looking at is the operational support. So besides the response plans that we discussed, we have established what we recommend as minimum requirements for a functional wash sector coordination and operation. It was actually presented yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. And in there, we put in some, you know, key parameters that wash sectors need to have to be effective. So one of them is having a response plan, but another one is, for example, having a monitoring framework that allows them to monitor progress and trends. And already 8 countries adopted those, and we are hoping to scale that up to be able to have monitoring done at scale, where we are able to sort of compare the responses across the different countries. And so yes, these are just, you know, some of the examples. Of course, continuing with regional analysis and evidence. One area that we are looking at that we need to discuss actually with Virginia is around the integration of Venezuelan refugees and migrants in local and national public policies. As you know, there are 17 countries in LAC hosting Venezuelan refugees, and after Syria is the biggest you know, movement of people around the world. And so we hope to capitalize on the countries that are doing a good job in integrating them, and you know, and sort of building that lesson and advocating for the continued integration, so that we move away from sort of humanitarian service delivery to, you know, public policies and services integration of these populations.
Thank you, Sunny, for your response. I think that was the last big question here. We also have some people asking if we can share the link to the SIWI and UNICEF report with our participants. If that's okay with you, we can share it with our audience.
Of course, it's public. Yes, we would be delighted to have it read, commented, and there is our emails there. You can catch up on us with more questions. Feel free. Yeah, please.
Yeah, if you allow me, just you can go. I can also share the link. I'll share to the panelists because I don't have access, but I just shared the link to the report. And I'll also share the link to the SDLAC group website, where you can find a lot of other information that we do at sort of regional level, no, beyond the public policy mapping.
Perfect. I just shared that to all the attendees. So thank you so much for that. Well, yeah, we're finishing right on time here. Once again, I'd like to say thank you to our wonderful speakers, Virginia and Sonny, for your time today and presenting this wonderful information. And thank our audience too for being here and listening and submitting your questions. As a reminder, we have one more fantastic event happening today at 5 p.m. On the stories of defending the Amazon. So be sure to tune into that event. Okay, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you.
invitation.
Yeah. Gracias.
Gracias. Adiós.
Yes.